Gremio, Tir McDohl's guardian. Gremio has taken care of Tir McDohl since he was 6 years old, acting somewhat like a surrogate older brother. Many of us found Gremio to be annoying in our younger years, as he can be quite overbearing in how he constantly fusses over Tir. But as we've grown older, he's a character that many of us have grown to appreciate and love so much more, and this story explores why he's so devoted to Tir. Gremio's backstory was explored in a short story titled Acts of the Oath, which was included in the Genso Suikoden Short Story Collection 1, a book that released in Japan in August 2000. Much like Victor's backstory video, the information in this video may not be new to many of you, as I've already covered the major points of this short story in the History of the Scarlet Moon Empire video. However, this video will be covering Gremio's story in much more detail. This story takes place during the War of Succession in the solar year 446, when Gremio was 16 and Tir was 6. As I mentioned in the History of the Scarlet Moon Empire video, this short story does mess a little bit with the timeline of the war. The 24 short stories in this collection were written by 8 different authors, none of whom had anything to do with the games. So mistakes, contradictions, continuity errors and whatnot do exist. The short story books are a lower tier of canon compared to the games, so just brush off any mistakes that you hear. This is the last short story from the books to cover, and it's by far the longest short story in the entire collection, so strap in because this is going to be a long one. Chapter 1. The story opens with Gremio frantically searching through the streets of Gregminster for Tir as nighttime approached. As he entered the park in the centre of the city, he heard Cleo's voice call out to him, coming from the direction of the fountain. In an angry panic, Cleo grabbed Gremio by the collar and asked him if he's found Tir yet, and told him that Master Tio is preparing to head out soon. Gremio responded that he can't breathe and he can't find the young master. Cleo asked him if he's checked with Tir's friends and the castle guards. Gremio responded that he checked everywhere, that he searched the entire city, but Tir is nowhere to be found. Cleo let go of Gremio's collar, but gave him a menacing look as she told him that Master Tio leaves Tir in his care when he needs to leave the capital. She told him she understands he's doing the best he can, but if he can't do his job properly, he's useless. Gremio apologised as he scanned the moonlit park for any sign of Tir. The story then explains how Gremio came to serve in the McDohl household. Gremio once lived in a village with his parents near the border between the Scarlet Moon Empire and the city-states of Joustin. At the age of 9, in the solar year 439, his parents were killed by Joustin soldiers in a border dispute between the two nations. Following the death of his parents, Gremio spent the next 7 years wandering the land until 3 months ago when Tio McDohl, who was travelling north on a mission, found Gremio wandering alone in the Caracas desert. Tio considered taking Gremio on as a soldier, but judging his personality, he decided Gremio would make a better caretaker than a warrior. He offered Gremio the chance to live in the capital, with the only condition being that he takes care of his son. Tio had lost his wife 4 years ago and felt bad about having to leave his son with friends and acquaintances whenever he needed to leave the capital. He wanted his son to have a steady presence and had been looking for a personal attendant for some time. Moved by Tio's kindness, Gremio accepted the offer and devoted his life to Tio, bringing along the axe his father used as a lumberjack. Gremio wanted to repay Tio's kindness, but felt looking after Tir was a reward in itself. Every time he called out to Tir, Tir's fluffy face would break into a smile, and Tir's eyes lit up every time Gremio made him stew, which he learned from his mother. The story then cuts back to the present. Earlier in the day, Tir had grown restless when he heard that his father had received new orders to depart the capital and ran outside the house. Gremio began to panic and started wondering if perhaps Tir had been kidnapped or if he had fallen into the moat around the castle. Cleo told Gremio that Tio's orders came far too suddenly and he'd been ordered to depart immediately with only the armoured cavalry and Lord Ainguide's troops that were stationed outside the city. There wasn't enough time to organise and deploy all of his forces or the Imperial Guard, or to conduct a search for Tir. Cleo then told Gremio that they have to report the situation about Tir's disappearance to Master Tio. Gremio wanted to continue the search, but reluctantly agreed with Cleo that reporting to Master Tio had to take priority considering his imminent departure. The two arrived back at the McDohl mansion, where they found Tio and Cleo's horses tied to an elm tree by the entrance with a wagon full of supplies that Gremio had loaded earlier. Before heading inside, Cleo glanced back at Gremio, who had a terrified look on his face as if he was about to face the death penalty. The two entered the house and Cleo announced that they were back. Tio, with an anxious look on his face, asked them if they'd found Tyr yet. Gremio looked as if he wanted to crawl into a hole and hide, but Cleo poked him in the shoulder and prompted him to speak up. He said he searched all over the city and apologized for not being able to find Tyr. Tio told him not to worry so much. He said Tyr may be young, but he's still a man, though it's a shame he won't be able to see him before he departs. Tio then told Gremio that pirates have recently begun terrorizing villages in the Guran region and that Emperor Barbarossa is currently heading to the Kunan region to pray for a good harvest. And if the pirates are left unchecked, they could cause trouble and be a hindrance to His Majesty's return. He then informed Gremio that he had been ordered by Assam, a legal officer in the Imperial Court, to ride out and deal with the pirates immediately. Cleo then wondered out loud where Tyr could possibly have run off to and asked Gremio when was the last time he saw him. Gremio replied that the last time he saw him was when he set him down for his afternoon nap after he had his lunch. After that, Gremio went to pack the wagon. Tio interrupted and asked, and then he was gone. Gremio replied that his red clothes were gone, so he thought Tyr had gone out to play. Cleo added that maybe Tyr was having so much fun that he forgot to come home. Just then, they heard a sneeze coming from outside the front door. They ran outside to check, but there was no one in sight. As Gremio and Cleo scanned the area, Tio called out to them and pointed to the wagon beside the horses. The sleeves of Tyr's clothes could be seen poking out from the wagon. Gremio called out young master and the sleeves quickly withdrew into the wagon, but then another sneeze could be heard. Relieved and shocked, Gremio helped Tyr out of the carriage, but Tyr sprung into a tantrum, repeatedly shouting no and stating that he's going with his father. Gremio tried to explain to him that he can't go because his father is leaving to fight pirates, but Tyr kept shouting, demanding Gremio let go of him. Flailing in Gremio's arms, Tyr kicked him in the stomach and escaped from Gremio's grasp before climbing back into the wagon. Tyr was sulking and paid no attention to anything Gremio said. Tio approached and told Tyr to stop being so selfish, that he's going to the battlefield and if anything happened to him, how could he possibly go on, and what would his mother say? He began patting Tyr's head as he told him he'll be back soon, but until then he needs to be good and listen to Gremio and that he needs to wipe those tears away because crying isn't something that men do. Tyr wiped his tears away and got down off the wagon. Gremio and Tyr then saw Tio and Cleo off as they returned to the house. Gremio began preparing stew for dinner as he worried about Tyr's behaviour. Tyr was normally a kind and obedient child, but Gremio realised that was because of Tio's influence and not his own. Tyr had suddenly changed the moment he found out his father would be leaving, and Gremio wondered where this 6-year-old child developed the patience to hide in such a tiny cramped space for so many hours without anyone noticing. Having lost his own parents at such a young age, Gremio knew all too well that it was only natural for Tyr not to want to leave his father's side. Gremio then began to reminisce about his own parents. Gremio's father was a kind and gentle man, a completely different person from the man he was while fighting the city-state soldiers to protect his family, and his mother, who was already wounded and drenched in her own blood, did everything in her power to protect Gremio from their blades. His parents who loved and protected him were no longer in this world, and he knew he would never again see their warm, comforting smiles. Remembering his own parents, Gremio was overcome with a wave of loneliness and felt a sudden urge to cheer Tyr up, but his stomach began to rumble as he stirred the stew and sprinkled in the spices. He set the table in the dining room and sat the sulking Tyr at the table. He sat beside Tyr and with a gentle voice he told him if he hadn't sneezed earlier he might have been able to go with his father. Tyr looked at Gremio and replied he couldn't help it. The cover on the wagon was so dusty it made his nose itch every time the wind blew. Gremio told him he understands how he feels, but he doesn't need to worry about his father as he'll return safe and sound just like he always does. Tyr wondered out loud how far along the road his father is right now. He had a distant look in his eyes and Gremio couldn't tell if he was even listening. He told Tyr that if his father marches through the night he'll probably reach Lennon Camp by the morning. Tyr began to sob while eating the stew as Gremio told him that he was worried sick about him earlier and that he feared he might have been kidnapped or he had fallen in the moat. Gremio tried to put his hand on Tyr's shoulder, but Tyr brushed it away and ran to his room. Gremio stood in the dining room, not knowing how to deal with the frustrated and upset Tyr. The story then cuts to the castle. A man in a rainbow-coloured gown looked down at Gregminster from the castle balcony as he laughed and told Assam that he'd done a good job. Assam replied that it was nothing. General Teo's loyalty to Barbarossa is unparalleled, and if he thought Barbarossa was in danger, it wouldn't take any convincing to get him to ride out. The man then asked Assam if pirates had really attacked the Goran region, and how can he be so sure that Teo won't return. Assam responded that he made sure to send a messenger to the pirates with a hefty sum of potch to encourage them to attack, and that Teo will be so focused on fighting them to protect Barbarossa that he won't be paying any attention to anything else. The man then asked Assam about the other generals. Assam told him that Qasim can't leave the northern region, that Milik and Kwanda are with Barbarossa in the Kunan region acting as his personal guard, and Kalauya Shulin is busy engaging pirates on Lake Torin. Assam then told the man, who was revealed to be Gale Rugner, Barbarossa's uncle, that everything is going to plan and there isn't a single person in the capital who can interfere with his ascension to the throne. Filled with excitement, Gale declared his time has finally come, that he had spent so long bowing down to that little runt, but the wait has finally paid off. He then asked Assam if they can finally pay everyone back for taking the throne from him. The throne that his brother Michaelan stole from him by forging his father's will and passing it to Michaelan's son Barbarossa instead of him. Assam replied that the troops are in place and preparations for the trial of disinheritance are set, that all they need to do is wait for Teo to pass through Quaba Fortress and seal the gate. Then everyone loyal to Barbarossa will be outside of the Arlis region, the capital region of the Empire. Gale then handed Assam his sword and told him to cut down anyone who defies him. Assam responded it would be his pleasure and suggested that they take the friends and families of everyone loyal to Barbarossa hostage to use them as leverage. Gale told him it was a brilliant plan and asked him how long it would take for Teo to pass through Quaba Fortress. Assam responded it would take about 5 days. Gale began laughing wickedly as he fluttered his cape and disappeared into the dark castle as Chapter 1 comes to an end. Chapter 2. It had been 3 days since Teo departed. Tyr had locked himself inside his room and had been refusing to eat anything. When he finally left his room, he went straight to Teo's room, yearning for his father's warmth. Gremio tried to cheer him up by suggesting they go for a picnic or for a walk around the market, but Tyr ran off when Gremio tried to speak to him. Worried about Tyr's well-being, Gremio began leaving food in Tyr's room instead of trying to coax him out, and would come back feeling relieved to see that the plates were empty. Yet Gremio still felt irritated with himself for not being able to console Tyr. It had now been 5 days since Teo departed. Gremio snuck into Tyr's room at night and quietly watched him sleep. As Tyr tossed and turned in his bed, his blanket came off, and as Gremio pulled his blanket back over him, Tyr let out a quiet whimper, crying out for his mommy. Hearing Tyr talk in his sleep struck Gremio with a sense of loneliness. He began to realise why Tyr wasn't warming up to him as much as he had hoped. Tyr yearned for his deceased mother, and he was always worried about his father being away in battle. No matter how hard Gremio tried, there was no room for him in Tyr's heart. Gremio began reflecting on his own past, how he never opened up to anyone after his parents were killed by the jousting soldiers, and how he spent all those lonely nights camped in dark forests haunted by his nightmares. Tyr was blessed to still have one parent, but Gremio felt that Tyr was now also wandering through that same darkness he once did. Gremio softly said to Tyr as he slept that everything will be okay. He decided to spend the night in Tyr's room watching over him. He knew he could never take the place of Tyr's parents, but he hoped he could make Tyr feel safe in his presence. He quietly left the room and headed down the stairs to get a blanket for himself, but just as he opened his bedroom door next to the kitchen, he heard the sound of footsteps surrounding the mansion. He suspected they might be thieves and reached for his axe in the corner of his room. Just as he entered the hallway, he could hear the sound of clanging metal coming from outside the main entrance. It was a familiar sound that reminded him of the sound the city-state soldier's armor made the night his parents were killed. Gremio immediately sprinted up the stairs to check on Tyr, but Tyr was already up and looking out the window. Gremio told him that someone is trying to break into the house, that it's too dangerous to stay and that they need to leave immediately. Tyr gave Gremio a worried look. Gremio nodded with a forced smile and took Tyr by the hand. The two made their way downstairs towards the kitchen to escape into the alley using the back door. Gremio thought if they could make it to the guard barracks, they'd be safe. Just as Gremio was about to open the door, a loud gong pierced the air. Suddenly, voices could be heard shouting, demanding they open the door. The front door then began being hacked at with axes, and windows were being smashed. Gremio knew there was no escape. the mansion was surrounded and the doors were being broken down. He wondered who would dare attack the home of Tio McDohl. He told Tyr that everything was going to be okay as he stood with his back to the wall, hiding Tyr behind him. He thought if he could buy just enough time, surely the guards would arrive to save them after hearing all the commotion. But those thoughts were shattered the moment the kitchen door was broken through and in came the very soldiers he expected to save him. Gremio stood in shock as soldiers came pouring in and began ransacking the house. The soldiers told him they'd spare his and Tyr's lives if they surrendered quietly. Gremio asked them what they think they're doing and told them that there's no way Master Tio will forgive them for ransacking his home. The soldiers surrounded Gremio, who was now trembling in fear, and began laughing at him. As they laughed, one of the men asked, did he really just say Master Tio, and commented to the other men, just wait until he finds out what happened to his master. Gremio tried to ask what he's talking about, but as he opened his mouth, a soldier drew his sword and pointed its tip at Gremio's nose. The soldier replied if he really wants to know so badly. They're the Imperial Guard under the command of Gale Rugner, and they've been ordered to take the traitors captive. Gremio asked what makes them traitors. A voice could then be heard coming from behind the soldiers. The soldiers began lining up, and a short, chubby man in a black robe with a greasy face and nasty smile and tan skin appeared in front of him. Gremio readied his axe and asked him who the hell he is. The man introduced himself as Assam, a legal officer in the Scarlet Moon Empire. He commented to Gremio that you must be a servant of the McDohl household and that must be Tyr, son of the traitor General Tio. Startled by Assam's words, Gremio turned to look at Tyr. Tyr was trembling and firmly holding on to Gremio's leg. Tyr gave Assam a menacing stare and asked him who he thinks he is. Assam let out a laugh and in a mocking tone he told Tyr that he's got guts and he expected no less from the son of General Tio. He then called them traitors and told them if they continue to be so defiant he can't guarantee their safety, so they'd be doing themselves a favour if they surrender. Gremio responded by asking why he wants to arrest them so badly and asking what could Master Tio possibly have done to be labelled a traitor. Assam replied by telling him that Barbarossa had been deceiving everyone and that he has been officially relinquished of the throne at the trial of disinheritance, making everyone that followed Barbarossa's illegal rule a traitor, including the McDohl household. Gremio was about to ask Assam a question but fell silent as he focused on the commotion outside. He could hear the sound of swords clashing, the screams of men and women, and the incessant pulsing of the gong coming from the direction of the castle. It was obvious there was a battle and a massacre taking place out on the streets. Assam rolled his eyes at Gremio and asked him if he understands the situation. He told him that Emperor Gale has ordered a purge of anyone loyal to Barbarossa. Finally, Gremio understood the full picture. Gale had waited for his nephew Barbarossa to leave the capital before making his move to usurp the throne, and his first act to cement his rule was to capture everyone who remained loyal to Barbarossa. Gremio took a quick glance at Tyr and knew that he'd be taken as a hostage and used for leverage, something he wasn't about to let happen. In a very casual tone, Assam told Gremio that he's a busy man, so they better hurry up and surrender. Gremio responded that he refuses, that Master Tio left Tyr in his care and he'll do anything to protect him. Assam nodded at the soldiers but told them that he needs them alive. The soldiers approached Gremio and surrounded him. One of the men feigned drawing his sword but struck Gremio in the stomach instead. Leaning forward from the pain, another soldier struck Gremio in the back with his spear. Gremio, who had no training as a fighter, was no match for the well-trained Imperial Guard. Tyr cried out Gremio's name as the soldiers grabbed him while Gremio lay on the ground. Gremio grabbed his axe and stood back up, lunging at the nearest soldier as he told them to leave Tyr alone. The soldier easily dodged his attack as he fell forward from the pain in his back. He began blindly swinging his axe at every soldier he could see, but he was quickly overpowered and the soldiers beat him until he lay collapsed on the floor. A soldier grabbed Gremio by his hair and jerked his head up. Assam stood over him and told him that he's more trouble than he's worth. Tyr began crying out for Gremio. Gremio looked over and saw Tyr tied up with his hands covered in bruises and red marks from the soldiers being so rough. As Gremio called out Tyr's name, Assam pressed his sword against Gremio's cheek. Gremio begged Assam to let Tyr go and to take him instead. Assam scoffed and told Gremio that Tyr is the only person he needs. He then flashed a smile at Gremio and told him that he'll let him live to deliver a message to Tio. The message was, 2 weeks from now, their forces will march towards Quaba Fortress to challenge Tio. and if he ever wants to see his son alive again, his cavalry are to fight without their armor. Gremio asked what, and Assam responded that Teo's armored cavalry are practically invincible, that they've never lost a single battle and they're the biggest threat to Gale, so if he wants to see his son alive, they better fight without their armor. As Gremio called him a coward, Assam cut his cheek with his sword. He then withdrew his sword and told Gremio that the sword was gifted to him by Emperor Gale, and that the scar on his cheek is proof of his words, and he better tell Teo everything as if they were direct orders from Gale himself. One of the soldiers then kicked Gremio in his side. The soldiers then tied Gremio up and gagged him before wrapping him up in a straw mat and tossing him in the back of a carriage. Gremio was reeling from the pain, he was given very little to eat, and in his weakened state he drifted in and out of consciousness many times. All he could think about was Tyr, and he worried about what those soldiers might be doing to him. After 5 days of being tied up in the back of the carriage finally passed through Quaba Fortress. He was unloaded from the carriage and thrown to the ground before eventually being unrolled from the straw mat. Standing over him were none other than Cleo and Teo. Cleo called out his name in surprise and asked him where Tyr is as she helped him up to his feet. Gremio looked down at his feet, unable to answer. Cleo grew angry and began shouting, demanding to know where the young master is and questioning if he left him behind. She grabbed him by the shoulder and began violently shaking him, but Gremio started to cry. She told him crying won't solve anything and again demanded that he answer. Teo told her that's enough and commented that judging by the scar on his face and his worn out state, something bad must have happened. Forgetting that his hands were still tied, Gremio burst into tears and threw himself at Teo's feet, begging Teo to forgive him. Teo responded in a soft voice, trying to calm Gremio down. He told Gremio that he knows something is wrong at the capital and they tried to return, but they were stopped at Quaba by Gale's generals, so he sent word to Barbarossa and camped here while waiting for orders. Teo ordered his men to untie Gremio and asked him where Tyr is. Gremio replied that Tyr has been taken hostage by Gale's men. He told Teo the message he had been asked to deliver by Assam, that Gale's main force will meet him on the battlefield at Quaba Fortress in 2 weeks, but under the condition that his cavalry rides into battle without their armour, otherwise Tyr will be killed. The soldiers went into an uproar at the news. Teo had been delivered a terrible choice, the lives of his men in exchange for the life of his son. Gremio again apologised to Teo that he was unable to protect Tyr. Cleo began shaking Gremio violently once again, but Teo placed his hand on hers and told her to let go of Gremio. He told her that it's not Gremio's fault, but rather it's his own. But Gremio once again blamed himself for being unable to protect Tyr and suggested that he should be beheaded for his failure. Teo stopped Gremio from talking and told him that it's thanks to him that they know who their enemy is and what they've been up to the entire time. He said it was Assam who suggested he deal with the lake pirates and he fell right into the trap by leaving the capital. Teo took a deep breath and called himself a fool. He said it's all his fault that the capital has fallen and that the blame lies with him for the lives of every soldier and townsperson lost and that he'll never be able to pay for that failure. Gremio and Cleo both called out Master Teo. They told him that the only reason he rode out was to do good by protecting Emperor Barbarossa, and he even left most of his force behind at the capital to protect the castle. Teo replied that he was a fool for not being able to see through the enemy's plans and he has no intention of making any excuses for his failure. Teo then told Cleo and Gremio that many lives are sacrificed during war, soldiers and civilians alike, and he cannot give special treatment to Tyr just because he's his son. Teo then turned to the soldiers behind him and drew his sword. He raised his sword up high and made a speech to his men. He addressed them as brave and valiant soldiers of the Empire. He told them that 2 weeks from now, at Quaba Fortress, they'll make their stand against Gale's forces. He asked them to fight alongside him for the honour of His Highness Barbarossa and tells them that he's ready to give his life in service of the Emperor. The soldiers shouted out excitedly, morale skyrocketed and the soldiers were inspired by Teo's loyalty and his willingness to sacrifice his own son in servitude of the Emperor. But to Gremio, Teo's words struck worse than death. How hard must it have been for Teo to choose to sacrifice his own son in order to fulfill his duties? Gremio set his gaze downward, unable to look Teo in the eyes. He believed it was his failure to protect Tyr that set Teo down this path. Teo told Gremio to focus on recovering from his injuries. He and Cleo then returned to their posts. Gremio knew there was no place for him here among the soldiers, and he stood looking past Quabbah Fortress in the direction of Gregminster. He began thinking about Tyr and his cheerful smile, but in 2 weeks Tyr's smile would disappear forever. Gremio shook his head to clear his thoughts, but saw the straw mat that had bound him nearby. He unrolled the rest of the mat and found his axe inside with a note attached that read, "A dull axe for a dull wielder, fitting for a cowardly servant of the McDohl family." Assam's soldiers attached the note in an effort to humiliate Tio even further, but Gremio was no longer bothered by such insults. As he picked up the axe, he remembered how Tyr frightfully clung to his leg back in Gregminster and cried out his name as he was being dragged away, the same way Gremio clung to his mother when the city-states invaded many years ago. Deep down, Gremio realized that while Tyr might have been upset about his father being away, Tyr still trusted and depended on Gremio. Looking down at the axe in his hands, Gremio understood how his father must have felt when the city-states attacked. As if trying to encourage himself, he cried out that Tyr is depending on him and there's no way he's going to lose the young master. Gremio then made his way towards the stables and stole a horse. He rode through the camp and set out for Gregminster as Chapter 2 comes to an end. Chapter 3. With Quabbah Fortress locked down and under Gale's control, Gremio rode towards Shahrazad, the only other route to the capital. He was fortunate to find a fisherman and pleaded with him to take him to Gregminster, claiming that his parents had been caught up in the attack at the capital. The fisherman welcomed Gremio aboard his ship and told him about the current state of the capital. He told him about Gale's dirty tricks, how he rallied his men to kill the castle guard loyal to Barbarossa, how he usurped the throne, and that he hired bandits to raise villages. He then told Gremio that Gregminster is in shambles thanks to the bandits burning and looting everything in sight. Gremio responded in shock, saying that can't be true. The fisherman told him that many innocent civilians have been slain and that the capital is pretty much a barren wasteland at this point, with some calling it nothing more than a hideout for bandits. He advised Gremio to get the hell out of there as fast as he can if he encounters any trouble. Gremio's heart sank upon hearing the fisherman's words, but he knew Tyr would be kept safe as he was too valuable a hostage. Fortunately, it wasn't all bad news. The fisherman told him that Kalauya Shulin's naval forces were putting up a good fight against the pirates, which left the sluice gates unguarded, freeing up the path to the Arlis region. Shortly after passing through the sluice gate, Gremio got off the boat, thanked the fisherman for his help, and made his way to Gregminster. It had now been 6 nights since Gremio left Tio's camp. It took longer than expected to arrive at the capital, and Gregminster's defences were tight. As he approached the city, he remembered what the fisherman had told him about Gale hiring bandits. He walked towards the guards, pretending to be one of Gale's hired hands. The guards eyed him suspiciously, but took him for a bandit and let him inside after seeing the scar on his cheek. Upon entering the city, Gremio ran all over the city in search of Tyr. He was shocked to see it was just as the fisherman had said. The entire city had been laid to waste by Gale's men. Wooden houses had been burned to the ground, and brick houses had collapsed into piles of rubble. Gremio asked the bandits and grief-stricken townspeople for clues about Tyr's whereabouts, but he couldn't get any information from them. Martial law had also been put into effect, preventing Gremio from moving around at night. His first 2 days in the capital yielded nothing, but on the 3rd night, Gremio broke martial law and snuck around the city. As he stood in front of the McDohl mansion, he was reminded of all the wonderful times he spent with Tyr, and those memories kept his morale up until now. But seeing the windows smashed and the house covered in scorch marks made Gremio bite his lip in anger, and with only 5 days to go until Tio marches into battle, he started to panic. Gazing at the mansion under the moonlit sky, Gremio suspected that Tyr might be held captive in the castle. With no time to lose, and while gripping his axe tightly, he declared he'd get into the castle no matter what. Just then, a soldier called out asking Gremio what he thinks he's doing. Gremio turned around and leapt in surprise. Not because he was afraid, but because the soldier in front of him was one of the same soldiers that attacked him back at the mansion. The soldier recognized Gremio too, but the moment he called out, Gremio ran off as fast as he could. In addition to the injuries he was still recovering from, Gremio hadn't eaten any real food since returning to Gregminster 3 days ago, and he was too weak to fight. The soldier caught up to Gremio and grabbed his cape. He asked Gremio what the hell he's doing here, as he thought he'd been sent to Tio's camp. Gremio shook off the soldier with the handle of his axe and demanded to know where Tyr was being kept. The soldier laughed as he commented, "So that's why you came back." Gremio demanded that he answer him, otherwise he'd bash his head in. Gremio swung his axe at the soldier, who easily dodged the attack. The soldier tauntingly asked Gremio if he thinks he can best him. He then drew his sword and slashed Gremio's arm, causing him to lose his grip on the axe. The tip of the soldier's sword then shone brightly under Gremio's nose. The soldier told Gremio to say his prayers, that he's been a real pain in the ass and it's time he died. Gremio grit his teeth. He couldn't afford to die yet, not until at least seeing Tyr one last time. The soldier pointed his sword at Gremio as if to tease him. Gremio took a few steps backwards and hit the wall behind him. There was no place to run. The soldier let out a wicked laugh and told Gremio he'll have all eternity to look after that little brat. Just as he was about to stab Gremio with his sword, a loud bang could be heard and the soldier collapsed to the floor with a mighty crash. Unsure of what just happened, Gremio stood puzzled. A voice called out to him from above, telling him to sheathe the soldier's sword and to get up here quickly. Gremio looked up and saw a boy no older than 12 or 13 waving at him from the third floor window of a nearby building. As Gremio sheathed the soldier's sword, he realised what caused the loud sound he just heard. The soldier's helmet was caved in with fragments of brick stuck inside. The boy had thrown a brick at the soldier's head. The street outside was filling with the sound of soldiers' footsteps, so Gremio picked up his axe and ran into the building and up the stairs to where the boy was. The boy told Gremio that was close, but he's safe now. The moonlight allowed Gremio to get a closer look at the boy. His skin was covered in sunburns. He was so thin his cheekbones were showing, making his large eyes stand out even more, and his blue-striped shirt was in tatters. Gremio thanked the boy for saving him, but the boy shushed him. Soldiers who made their way down the street were now standing over the unconscious soldier. Gremio and the boy held their breaths, but the soldiers didn't investigate the area. They merely grumbled and carried off the body of the collapsed soldier. Gremio asked the boy why the soldiers didn't try to investigate why one of their own lay unconscious on the street. The boy told Gremio that when the leader of the bandits was being chased by soldiers loyal to Barbarossa, he used some kind of magic which messed up the buildings and left them on the verge of collapse. So there's nothing strange about a loose brick falling on a soldier's head. Gremio finally understood why the boy asked him to sheathe the soldier's sword. It was to make it look like an accident. Gremio breathed a sigh of relief as his head filled with thoughts of Tyr. He thanked the boy for rescuing him, but told him he has no time to spare and he has to go. The boy asked him how he plans to leave, as the city is filled with Gale's soldiers and bandits. He then told Gremio that he seems kind of weak, so he'd probably just get beat again and get even more scars like the one on his cheek. Gremio was taken aback by the boy's comments, but replied to him politely and truthfully. He told the boy that he came to the capital in search of a young boy and he's not sure if he's still alive, but he won't give up until he finds him. The boy's expression turned sour as he let out a sigh. He asked Gremio if the person he's looking for is his little brother or a relative. Gremio responded that he's not a relative, but that he was entrusted with his care and his carelessness allowed him to be captured. The boy let out another sigh as if his eyes began to fill up with tears. He told Gremio how lucky the boy he cares for has someone trying to rescue him. Gremio asked him what's wrong and placed his hands on the boy's trembling shoulders, but he brushed Gremio's hands away and began to cry with his back turned. Gremio was worried about Tyr, but he couldn't leave this child alone either. He spoke softly to the boy, saying that he seems to have his own problems and asking him if he wants to talk about it. The boy responded in a teary voice. He revealed that his name is Eiji and that he used to live in this room with his parents. He told Gremio that his father used to be a mercenary and that his parents made a living working in the armor store, but on the day of Gale's revolt, bandits came barging into their home to loot it and his parents were killed for resisting. The bandits then took him for slave labor, but he managed to slip away. Eiji then told him that he hates Gale and the bandits for what they've done, and he quells his anger by hurling bricks at the soldiers outside. Gremio couldn't help but feel sorry for Eiji. His circumstances were identical to his own, and he feared what might happen to the boy if he was caught by the soldiers. He told Eiji that there's no telling what will happen from here on out, but once he's accomplished what he set out to do, he'll come back for him and introduce him to General Tio, who'll help him find a job. Eiji's eyes opened wide in surprise as he asked Gremio if he just said General Tio. Gremio revealed to Eiji that he's an attendant to General Tio and his son. Eiji suddenly forgot that he had been crying up until now and began pacing back and forth in the room as if trying to recall something. Gremio looked concerned and asked Eiji if something was wrong. Eiji stopped moving and looked at Gremio, asking him what was the name of Tio's son. Gremio replied that Tio's son is named Tyr. Eiji's face lit up as he said that's it. He told Gremio that since he serves General Tio, he must be here to rescue Tyr, and he knows where to find him. Both belated and surprised, Gremio involuntarily grabbed Eiji's shoulders and began shaking him, asking him where the young master is, and telling him to tell him quickly that he needs to rescue him before Tio's battle, otherwise he'll be killed. Eiji gave off a mischievous grin and replied that he'd tell him on one condition. Gremio's eyes opened wide in surprise, but he knew he had no choice but to agree. He first asked Gremio what kind of battle Tio was riding into and what kind of trap that bastard Gale had set for him. Gremio told Eiji the whole story about how Tyr was taken hostage and was being used to pressure Tio's armoured cavalry to ride into battle without their armour, otherwise he'd be killed. Eiji bit his teeth in vexation as he called Gale a coward. He then told Gremio his terms, that he wants to accompany him in rescuing Tyr. Gremio asked him why he wants to come along, and Eiji responded that he wants to get revenge for what they did to his parents, and if they save Tyr, General Tio won't have to hold back. Eiji then told him that Tyr isn't being kept in Gregminster, and if they don't leave fast, they won't be able to save him in time. Gremio asked him how he knew that, and Eiji responded that he overheard the bandit leader talking with Gale's troops about Tyr, that he was too valuable a hostage, so they were moving him to a different town. Gremio agreed to Eiji's request to come along. Eiji cheered in excitement and told Gremio to wait here while he goes to steal some horses from the bandits outside. Eiji ran out of the house and down the street, and Gremio went down into the street below and hid in the shadows. A half hour had passed, and Gremio wondered if Eiji had been caught, or if he had been merely trying to draw information out of him before selling him out to the bandits, but he wanted to believe that Eiji was being truthful. Just as Gremio began to fret, he could hear the distant clatter of hooves and the angry bellows of men. Eiji was riding down the street with 2 horses while being chased by a group of bandits. Gremio was a nervous wreck, but he ran across the street to mount the second horse. As the 2 rode for the city gate, Gremio asked Eiji what they're going to do about the guards stationed at the gate, and Eiji bluntly responded, how would he know? Whatever happens, happens. All of the commotion had alerted the guards, and they were now around 10 men blocking the gate, shouting at the 2 to stop and asking them where they think they're going. Gremio and Eiji continued straight for the gate. Eiji pulled out a flaming arrow scroll and unleashed its power at the guards, causing them to scatter in a sea of flames. Watching the gate burn brought a grin to Eiji's face. As the 2 rode through the gate out of the city, Gremio asked him what was that scroll he just used. Eiji responded by telling him that it was the same magic power the bandit leader used when being pursued by Barbarossa's men, and all he did was mimic what the bandit had done. He told Gremio that he was only able to swipe 1 scroll, so they need to rely on themselves from here on out. Eiji then stuck his tongue out at Gremio and laughed as he said he was kidding. He doesn't have any more scrolls, but he did snatch a bunch of other things from the bandits that might be helpful. Gremio found Eiji to be a strange one. He was bold, fearless and cheeky, and Gremio wondered if he inherited it from his father, and if so, his father must have been quite the mercenary. Gremio then said to Eiji that he still hasn't told him where Tyr is being held. Eiji told him that Tyr is being kept in Sardi village and it'll take 3 days to reach there by horse. And that's the end of Chapter 3. Chapter 4. After 2.5 days on the road, Gremio and Eiji finally passed through Mount Tigerwolf and arrived at Sardi village. The 2 stumbled upon a most unusual sight. Despite Sardi being a small, remote mountain village, the village was overflowing with people. Families were sitting on the dirt-covered ground and everyone was gazing up at the sky with lifeless eyes. According to Eiji, almost every single person in the village came seeking refuge from Gale's army. They had initially fled Gregminster to surrounding towns and villages, but as Gale's influence spread, they were forced to flee to more remote places like Sardi. Gremio commented that it seems they're not the only ones with problems, and Eiji remarked that's why they've got to stick together, that if they can save Tyr, then General Tio will be able to fight and defeat Gale's forces to save everyone. As they walked around the village, it appeared Sardi was still free of Gale's influence, and they had an easy time gathering information, but the owner of the item store revealed that Gale's soldiers were here not long ago. He told Gremio that they're a bunch of rotten bastards who tried to steal his wares. He didn't see a kid with them, but they're currently staying at the inn. Gremio wasted no time and sprinted towards the inn. As soon as he entered, he called out for the innkeeper. A petite woman with white skin, frizzy red hair and blue eyes, donning a stained apron in a crimson-red dress, came from the back room. Gremio judged her to be around 40 years old and considered her to be quite beautiful. With a scowl on her face, she asked Gremio what he wants, and if he's looking for a room, he's out of luck as they're not taking any guests right now. Gremio asked her why's that, and the woman signalled towards the room to the side of the entrance with her chin. The sound of broken dishes and raunchy laughs could be heard coming from the room. Gremio immediately understood the situation, that no guests were allowed as the inn was currently being occupied by Gale's troops. As he tried to explain to her the reason he was here, a soldier opened the door and entered the inn. Gremio was flustered by the soldier's sudden appearance, and there was no way he could tell the innkeeper the truth in the presence of the very men who were likely holding Tyr hostage. The soldier approached Gremio and asked him who the hell he is. AG chimed in saying they were simply looking for something to eat as they were hungry after travelling such a long distance. The soldier then returned to the room where the other soldiers were, and the innkeeper had a look of bitterness on her face. She told Gremio and AG that they shouldn't be expecting anything fancy to eat with the way things are, and pointed at the table by the window before heading into the back room. Gremio and AG sat at the table. They'd been living off the rations AG stole from the bandits ever since leaving Gregminster, and the two were excited to finally have a proper meal. While sitting at the table, they eavesdropped on the conversations being had by the soldiers in the next room. There was no mention of a boy fitting Tyr's description, and the soldiers seemed more interested in vulgar topics like discussing which woman in the village had the best behind. The innkeeper arrived and delivered their food. The two were so hungry they put a pause to their eavesdropping and stuffed their faces. Although it was a simple pilaf made with leftover ingredients, they found it to be quite delicious. AG patted his stomach in satisfaction, but Gremio felt anxious. With the sun beginning to set and with only 3 days until the battle, they couldn't afford to be sitting around doing nothing but eavesdropping on the soldiers' conversations, hoping for a mention of Tyr. Just then, the innkeeper came to their table with a sullen face and asked them if they're done eating. She apologised for rushing them, but told them that they need to leave the inn quickly. Gremio thanked her for the delicious meal, but he was troubled by her words. If they were kicked out, they couldn't overhear any valuable information from the soldiers. The innkeeper let out a sigh and told him that they're not exactly in the best of circumstances here. She said that the soldiers are nasty guests and they get violent after a few drinks, and their violence only gets worse when they run out of drinks. She told him that even the Mount Tiger Wolf bandits behave better, and it's for their own good if they leave now before the soldiers start picking on them. Gremio didn't know how to respond. She spoke in a rough manner, but she seemed genuinely concerned about them. As he began packing his belongings, he was about to ask her if she had seen a boy matching Tyr's description, but she spoke first and told Gremio that she'd give him a discount for the meal and she'd only charge him 300 potch. Gremio panicked at the thought of paying. He didn't have a single thing on him except for his axe, and he looked nervously at AG, who returned the same troubled gaze to Gremio. The innkeeper's expression immediately changed to one of anger and irritation, as she suspected they tried to score a free meal out of her. Her voice packed so much force that the two fumbled through their pockets in search of anything to offer her, but all that came out of AG's pockets were a slingshot, an insect-bitten acorn, a candy wrapper, and a dirty handkerchief. The innkeeper became even more irritated and said she thought they were just tired travellers and she was trying to be nice to them by offering them a discount on the meal, and this is how they repay her. She then threatened to tie them up and feed them to the wolves. With her sudden change in behaviour, Gremio felt as if he was being threatened by the Mount Tiger Wolf bandits themselves. He hastily took AG's backpack and handed it to her. He apologised for the misunderstanding and that they didn't intend to dine and dash. He told her that she could take anything she wants from the bag in exchange for the food. The innkeeper began rummaging through the bag as Gremio and AG silently prayed. All she found in the bag were 2 pieces of dried meat, an old tattered rope, a glove with a hole in it, a whistle, half-drank medicine, and a few sleeping pills. She became even more frustrated as she called it all trash and asked them how they expect to pay their bill with garbage. AG lowered his head and apologised. He told her that they hadn't had any real food in a while, so they walked in without thinking. He offered to work off their debt and told her that Gremio was a great cook. She refocused her glare at Gremio as she commented, "Good at cooking, eh?" Gremio was afraid they wouldn't have time to search for Tyr, but knew he needed to pacify the innkeeper. He told her that he can't make much, but he guarantees that his bread and stew are the best. The innkeeper finally calmed down as she told Gremio it's time to get to work. She said she was planning on making stew tonight, so why doesn't he prepare dinner for everyone instead, but she warned him that Gale's soldiers are very picky eaters and if he serves them a bad dish, his head might go flying. She then headed into the kitchen as Gremio breathed a sigh of relief while turning to look at Eiji, who stuck out his tongue at Gremio in glee. Following the innkeeper's orders, Gremio went into the kitchen and began preparing dinner. But the innkeeper, who was seemingly tired of having to deal with the disgustingly ill-mannered soldiers, complained about having a headache and went to her room, leaving Gremio to work alone. Gremio and Eiji were now left alone with the soldiers, and the two couldn't have asked for better circumstances to find out some information on Tyr's whereabouts. Eiji pretended to clean the inn, giving him the perfect excuse to check each room as Gremio cleaned the kitchen. Eiji soon returned and told Gremio there's something fishy about the biggest room. Gremio asked him what he meant, and Eiji told him that the biggest room is actually made up of two separate rooms, and the inner room is being guarded, and when he tried to go in, he was stopped by the soldiers. Gremio's heart began racing as he suspected Tyr was being kept inside. He tried to run out of the kitchen, but Eiji grabbed his arm and called him an idiot. He asked Gremio what he's in such a hurry for, and told him that they're way in over their heads as they're up against Gale's elite guard, that they're not even sure Tyr is in there and one wrong step could get them both killed. Eiji's words stopped Gremio in his tracks. He apologized for being so hasty and told Eiji he's right. Eiji told him that they need to be calm and think their next move through carefully. Gremio took a deep breath and let out a long sigh to suppress his urge to charge into the room where they suspect Tyr was being held. He wondered how they were going to get inside the room, and they realized they first needed to do something about the soldiers guarding the door. Gremio began pacing back and forth in the kitchen with his arms folded. They were up against Gale's elite soldiers, and Gremio already learned the hard way that he was no match for them in battle. He wondered what other options he had as he started looking around the kitchen. An idea came to mind as he spotted Eiji's backpack. He whispered his plan into Eiji's ear, who nodded in excitement. Their eyes met as the two burst into laughter. Gremio began to put bowls of stew on a large tray and made his way into each room to serve dinner, apologizing for keeping the men waiting. Eiji followed after him with a bread basket in hand. Making their rounds, they observed the soldiers carefully, and it was just as Eiji had said. These were Gale's elite troops who were battle-hardened and covered in many scars. Gremio entered the largest room to find a soldier sitting on a chair in front of the door leading into the inner room. He was hit by a sudden urge to push away the soldier and open the door, but he remembered Eiji's words and restrained himself. After serving all of the soldiers their food, the two made their way back to the kitchen. Gremio was restless. He wanted to make his move right now, but Eiji called him an idiot and reminded him that they only just served dinner and they can't afford any mistakes. Eiji served himself up some stew as the two waited for some time to pass. Gremio kept telling his impatient self, just a little longer, just a little longer. Just then, they heard the sound of dishes breaking coming from the second floor. They held their breaths, but no further sounds came. No soldiers yelling at them to clean up the mess, and no one asking for a second serving. The two wondered if their plan had worked. Eiji grabbed a lamp and the two ran upstairs. They opened the first door and saw the soldier had dropped his bowl of stew and was fast asleep, snoring loudly. Gremio cheerfully declared they did it, and Eiji told him that it's all thanks to how delicious his stew is that the soldiers didn't notice they put the sleeping pills in it. They made their way through the rest of the rooms and checked on every soldier, who had all fallen asleep in the same manner. They finally reached the big room. Eiji gave the door a light knock, but there was no response. They slowly opened the door and all three of the soldiers inside were asleep. Gremio tried to open the inner door, but the door was locked. He cried out young master in a panic as he began banging on the door. A muffled whimper, as if someone was trying to talk while gagged, could be heard coming from the other side. There was no mistaking it. He was sure it was Tyr. Gremio called out to him, telling him that he's here to save him and it won't be long before they get him out. Eiji searched the soldiers for a key to the door while Gremio went back downstairs to check for any spares. He searched the reception area with no luck. Next, he checked the innkeeper's room, but was surprised to find the room was empty, with the innkeeper nowhere to be found. Frustrated at wasting time, Gremio ran into the kitchen to grab his axe to break down the door. As he left the kitchen, a voice could be heard asking him what the hell he thinks he's doing. Gremio turned around to find a soldier standing at the entrance with 7 bandits behind him as Chapter 4 comes to an end. Chapter 5. Gremio ran up the stairs and made his way to AG as the men chased after him. He asked AG if he found the key and told him that they have a soldier with a crew of bandits on their tail. Footsteps could be heard making their way down the hallway. There wasn't enough time for Gremio to break the door or to continue looking for the key. Not ready to go down without a fight, AG pulled out his slingshot and Gremio stood ready with his axe in hand in front of the inner door. The soldier and the bandits poured into the room. Gremio clenched his teeth as he realized they were cornered. The soldier let out a laugh and commented they must be here on orders from Tio to sneak in and take back the hostage. He then called Tio a sneaky bastard. Gremio told him he has no right to say that about Master Tio. Gremio could no longer hold back. He didn't care what happened to him, but Tyr's life was in danger and he wasn't going to allow anything to happen to him again. He told the soldier that they are the real cowards for trying to bring Tio down by kidnapping his son. AG then called them dirty, pathetic cowards for resorting to kidnapping because they know they don't stand a chance of winning against Tio's armoured cavalry. The soldier scoffed as he and the bandits drew their weapons. He told Gremio and AG that he sees they put sleeping pills in his men's food and it's too bad they didn't know he was out calling for backup from the Mount Tiger Wolf bandits. AG shouted at the soldier as the arm he was holding the slingshot in trembled. He asked the soldier why they even needed the help of the bandits to begin with. The soldier replied that they didn't come all this way just to hide Tyr. This was nothing more than a meeting place to hand him over to the bandits. He then questioned if they really thought Gale would send his elite soldiers out to such a remote village to babysit a child. Gremio muttered, "So that's how it is," before asking them where the key is. The soldier confusingly responded, "Huh?" Gremio again asked for the key to the room where they locked Tyr in. The bandits burst out laughing. Their repulsive, condescending laughter filled the room. Gremio asked what they're laughing at. The soldier mockingly called him Kiddo and asked him if he really thinks he can grab the key from him with those scrawny arms of his. The soldier then tugged on the chain around his neck. The clank of the key resonated as it brushed against his breastplate. The soldier then taunted Gremio to come and get it. Gremio pounced at the soldier, who easily evaded his attack, but before he could regain his balance, he bumped into the bandit that was standing directly behind the soldier. The bandit grabbed him by the shoulder and punched him in the stomach. Seeing Gremio in pain made him grin. The bandits then started laughing as Gremio was wheezing from the punch while they talked about how Tyr is going to make them rich as Gale is paying them by the day. Gremio held his breath to stand up and smashed the bandit in the jaw with the handle of his axe, knocking the bandit to the floor. The other bandits then joined in on the fight. Gremio swung his axe to defend himself while AG began maneuvering around the room, firing acorns at the bandit's head with a slingshot. Gremio followed up with his own attack against the bandits, flinching from the acorns being fired at their heads. A few of the bandits started chasing after AG, who evaded them by jumping over the beds. With 3 of the bandits now taken down, they decided to change their approach and gang up on AG. The moment AG jumped on a bed to evade an attack, one of the other bandits pulled the bedsheet from under him, causing AG to lose his balance and fall. Gremio jumped in with his axe to protect AG, but left himself defenseless. A bandit slashed Gremio's arm with his sword, and with a kick to the stomach, Gremio fell to the ground. A bandit then grabbed AG by the neck, who shouted at the bandit to let go of him. The soldier swung his sword at AG, and the bandit's axe was about to strike Gremio. Gremio wondered if this was the end. He closed his eyes and grit his teeth, but just then 2 loud clangs could be heard in rapid succession. If that was AG, then next was his own life. But the axe didn't come down, and AG could still be heard shouting from across the room. Gremio opened his eyes and was greeted by the innkeeper, who told him they did well. The bandit's axe, only a few millimeters from his face, was being blocked by the innkeeper's rapier. The loud clanging sounds turned out to be the sound of the innkeeper parrying the soldier's sword and the bandit's axe. Gremio propped himself back up in a hurry. The soldier who had tried to kill AG now lay dead on the ground, and the bandit whose axe she blocked leered at her angrily. She called the bandits pathetic losers and told them that they can't touch her. The next moment, she smashed the handle of the bandit's axe, causing him to lose his balance and fall over. She told them she heard everything they said and how they're working for Gale, before commenting how low the proud Mount Tigerwolf bandits have fallen. She swung her rapier and cut the arm of the bandit who was trying to stand up, the blood from his wound staining her apron. As the bandits were distracted by the innkeeper, AG took advantage of the opportunity and shook himself free from the bandit who was grabbing him and hid behind the innkeeper. With her show of swordsmanship and fearlessness, the bandits began to show some fear, and with their weapons at the ready, one of them shouted at her, asking her who the hell she is. The innkeeper replied that they must have been living in a cave not to have heard of her, and then asked them if they'd ever heard of Renettes of the slender dual swords. Renettes then revealed that while she may be an innkeeper now, she was once a Mount Tigerwolf bandit herself, and she was a feared raider during her time, but perhaps new recruits like them don't know of her. Both Gremio and AG looked at Renettes in awe. They now understood the sudden change in her attitude when they lacked the money to pay for their meal. Gremio asked Renettes in a low voice why she saved them. Renettes responded that she can't let them kill her cook, especially when he makes such a good stew. She revealed that she went to see a doctor for her headache, and it looks like she returned just in time. Gremio apologized for the state of her inn, and Renettes told him that he's too nice and that building an inn is easy work. She then said that she can't overlook what these bastards have done, that Gale's lackeys have rubbed her the wrong way since the moment they got here, but she didn't want to risk doing anything about it out of fear of what might happen to the village if they sent an entire company. She then added that she had enough, and taking a child hostage is going too far. Renettes pointed her rapier at the bandits as she asked them what the hell happened to the pride of the Mount Tigerwolf bandits. She remarked that Gale is a rotten bastard, and them kissing his ass pisses her off, that even if they were family, she wouldn't give a damn as they've tarnished the name and they're going down. The bandits told her she's one to talk as they raised their weapons. They scream they'll take the kid by force if they have to, and the money will come pouring in as long as they have him. One of the bandits then grabbed the key from around the soldier's neck, and the four bandits clumped together by the window. They slowly approached Gremio and AG while moving along the wall. Renettes readied to engage the bandit on the right, and Gremio prepared to engage the bandit on the left, while AG loaded up his slingshot with acorns. Gremio still felt anxious as they were outnumbered, but just then Renettes lowered her rapier and told the bandits to do themselves a favour and drop their weapons. They asked her if she had her head on straight, and Renettes responded by telling them to look out the window. One of the bandits turned to look out the window and let out a yelp as he commented they're surrounded. Renettes then told them that even if they were to somehow defeat her, there's no way to get out of the village alive. She revealed that she had one of the doctor's trainees go around the village and gather everyone to help. As if in response to her statement, a young man wielding a sword entered the room. He told Renettes that everyone in the village happily came to surround the inn when he told them that she was going to fight Gale's troops, and even the refugees who fled the capital took up arms to help them. The young man then turned to the bandits and told them that while Lennenkamp has fallen to Gale's forces, the town's garrison managed to escape and are on their way to Saradi as they speak, and when they arrive they'll have over 300 men to help protect the village, so it won't matter how many bandits come. Taking advantage of the opportunity, Renettes told them to surrender, that the old her would have cut them all down without giving them a chance, but she's mellowed since opening an inn and she's giving them a chance to live. The bandits all admitted defeat and dropped their weapons and the key to the floor. Gremio picked up the key and Renettes tapped him on the shoulder. She told him that he and AG did a great job and she never imagined that two kids could last that long against Gale's elite soldiers. AG retorted that he's not a kid and asked Renettes why she didn't help sooner if she heard everything they were saying. Renettes laughed and apologized, saying that she had hidden her rapiers in the back of a drawer and that it took her a while to get them out. In a slightly miffed voice, AG commented that they almost died. Gremio was too happy and full of excitement to see Tyr again that his hands were trembling and he couldn't fit the key inside the keyhole. He told AG that he couldn't have saved Tyr without him and asked AG to come open the door for him. AG unlocked the door and Gremio opened it up. Tyr was tied up inside the room on the bed with a gag in his mouth. With tears clouding his vision, Gremio cried out young master and rushed towards Tyr. With his hands still trembling, he untied the rope and removed the gag. At that moment, the only word that came out of Tyr's mouth was Gremio's name. The two took some time delighting in their tear-filled reunion. The bandits were hauled away by the villagers, and all that remained in the room were AG, Renettes, Gremio and Tyr. AG called out to Gremio and told him that it's great they were able to save Tyr, but Gremio knew exactly what he meant. They had to let Master Tio know immediately that Tyr is safe. AG responded exactly. If they don't get word to General Teo, then his cavalry may suffer huge casualties. Renette's eyes widened in surprise as she asked them what they're talking about. Gremio explained everything, and Renette asked him why he didn't mention all of this sooner. She told him that they needed to send out a messenger immediately. AG volunteered to go. Gremio tried to stop him by telling him that he needs to return Tyr, otherwise Teo will... Renette cut Gremio off and told him that if he brought Tyr along, he'd never make it in time. She told him that it'd be better and faster to let AG go by himself. Gremio turned to gauge AG's reaction and saw that his eyes were full of determination. AG volunteered to go and said he'll do whatever it takes to deliver the message to General Teo if it results in a crushing blow to Gale's army. Renette laughed as she tapped AG's shoulder. She told him to hurry up and get ready, and she'll give him the best horse they have. Gremio told AG he's counting on him and said he'd bring the young master afterwards. AG said leave it to him and bolted out of the room. Renette then headed outside to find a sailor to help AG cross Lake Torin. Gremio held Tyr in his arms and walked to the window where he saw Renette and AG speaking to the villagers outside. As Gremio looked up at the moon as if to offer a prayer, Tyr placed his hand on Gremio's cheek and asked him if he's okay, that there's still blood on his arm and wondering if it hurts. Gremio replied that it's nothing compared to what he had to go through. Tyr then commented how thin Gremio had gotten. Gremio felt strange hearing those words coming from Tyr's mouth, as Tyr had also lost weight while being held captive. But despite that, Tyr was only worried about Gremio's well-being, which made Gremio feel strange yet happy. A noise then filled the room. The sound of a man painfully groaning while crawling along the floor could be heard from across the room. It was the soldier Renette had cut down earlier. He was barely alive, but he was adamant he wasn't going to allow Tyr to escape. He raised his sword with his blood-soaked arm and flung it with all his might towards Tyr, who was being held snugly in Gremio's arms. The story then cuts to Teo. Teo stood before the opposing army in front of Quaba Fortress. Just as Assam had promised, it was time for the decisive battle. Teo placed his armoured cavalry in the front with the standard cavalry behind them. This was the same formation he always used when fighting against the city-states. The messenger Teo sent to Barbarossa had returned, and Barbarossa didn't lay any blame on Teo for leaving the capital. He knew Teo marched to the Guran region to protect him. Barbarossa's letter informed Teo that he was building up his forces in the Kunan region, and he ordered Teo to protect the front lines at all costs and to crush Gale's army. Teo hadn't informed Barbarossa about Tyr's kidnapping, as he felt leading his troops in battle was his duty, while Tyr's life was a personal matter. Taking a good look at the enemy's formation across the field, Teo turned to Cleo, who stood beside him. He asked Cleo if they learned anything about the enemy. Cleo responded that the army is being commanded by General Schmidt, who leads a battalion of 2,000 cavalry, and Bergen, who commands Quaba Fortress, who leads a further 1,000 cavalry, totaling 3,000 cavalry, while their own numbers only 1,000. In shock, Teo asked what? Cleo answered in a panic and apologised. She forgot to count Teo's armoured cavalry, which brings their number to 1,500. Teo let out a sigh and told her he understands what she was trying to say, but that he's already decided to fight and there's nothing left to do but carry out Barbarossa's orders. Cleo softly and hesitantly replied yes, which made Teo look down in shame. Teo rode to the front of the formation with Cleo by his side and surveyed the enemy lines. 3,000 troops was nothing to Teo. On top of that, while Schmidt was a fierce general, he was nothing more than a wild boar who knew only how to charge forward. With the armoured cavalry, breaking their lines would be a simple task. Teo tried to play the battle out in his head, making different movements with each platoon, but no matter how he played out the upcoming battle in his head, it ended in defeat, and whatever orders he gave, the armoured cavalry would retreat with their armour off. Teo clenched his teeth. He had never lost a single battle before, and this was the first time he had doubts. Yet he had no choice but to fight, to vindicate his honour and to protect Barbarossa. At least, that's what he was trying to tell himself, but images of his son and the mother who entrusted Tyr to him flashed through his mind. A voice called out to Teo from behind him. Teo turned around to see his good friend and loyal subordinate Aingide pull up next to him. He asked Teo if something was wrong, that surely Teo of all people couldn't be at a loss as to what to do. Teo unconvincingly responded, of course not. Ain took a long hard look at Teo and decided to speak his mind. He told Tio that he can see right through him, and for soldiers there's nothing more misfortunate than blindly following a lost commander into battle. He told Tio that indecisiveness dulls their blades and asked him to please make up his mind. Tio apologized and hung his head in shame, but Ein continued. He told Tio that he fails to see what perplexes him so much. That Assam's sole condition was for the armoured cavalry to ride into battle without their armour, but he never said anything about them not being able to draw their swords or strike with their spears. So why not remove their armour and place them at the back of the lines? Tio tried to argue Ein's point, but Ein responded by questioning Tio if he has no faith in the cavalry or in him who will lead them. If he thinks that if they fight, then surely they'd lose. Tio raised his face and looked Ein in the eyes. He appreciated what Ein was trying to say and for the consideration he was showing for Tyr. Ein continued. He told Tio that ever since he entered his service, he has readily and willingly put his life on the line and he's not afraid to die for their cause. He then begged Tio to put his faith in him to lead the charge and to make his decision quickly. Just as Ein ended his statement, a man's voice echoed across the field, calling General Tio a traitor. Tio set his sights on the general standing at the head of the enemy formation. General Schmidt, with his unkempt mustache, was clad in silver armour with a battle axe in hand. Schmidt called out to Tio, asking him why their cavalry still has their armour on and questioning if he doesn't care what happens to his son. He then taunted Tio, saying that losing the capital wasn't enough, now he has to lose his son too, that he is useless to his country and useless to his family, that he's a pathetic excuse for a general. Tio made up his mind. He told Ein to go right, Cleo to go left, and that he'll ride in the centre, and that they will not fall back or retreat. Cleo and Ein responded they understood. At that moment, there was a commotion on their left flank. A voice could be heard shouting that he has business with General Tio. The young voice pierced through the ranks and reached Tio. Tio, Ein and Cleo all looked at each other and nodded. The three rode towards the direction of the voice, only to find a young boy had somehow broke into their formation. Ein ordered the boy to speak and questioned who he is. Ag asked him if he's General Tio, and Ein responded that he's not, that he's a loyal subordinate. He then asked Ag to state his business. Ag refused, saying that it's top secret and he'll speak only to General Tio. Tio spoke up and asked Ag what the top secret message is. Ag said thank God he made it in time. He looked at Tio's face, then turned to the enemy across the field before turning back to face Tio. He then spoke in a low voice that he and Gremio rescued Tyr, that Gremio is on his way as they speak, so he must fight and defeat Gale. Tio looked up at the sky and his chest quivered with joy. He felt his strength and will return. The news caused a stir among the soldiers and morale skyrocketed. Tio's army was once again the strongest force in the Empire. Tio spoke to himself as he looked up at the sky, saying that Gremio done well and now he won't have to hold back and he can fight with all his strength for His Highness Barbarossa and for his son. Tio drew his sword and issued a command to the troops, telling them that this is the final battle and ordering them to give everything they've got. The story then cuts back to Gremio and Tyr. Gremio and Tyr had camped in a forest. Gremio breathed a sigh of relief while holding a tea kettle that Renettes had gifted him over the campfire. He wanted to have some tea prepared for Tyr, who was sleeping peacefully beside him. Back at the inn in Sardi, the soldier that threw the sword at them done so with his last ounce of strength, and the sword grazed Gremio's cheek, adding to the scar he already had. To Gremio, the scar was proof of his victory, a proud reminder of how he fended off Gale's troops and rescued Tyr. While preparing the tea, Gremio realised it was just as Renettes had said. He never would have made it to Tio's camp in time with Tyr by his side. But Gremio was no longer in a hurry as news of Tio's victory against Gale's army at Quaba Fortress was spreading like wildfire. Gremio threw another piece of wood on the fire while thinking about Ag and thanking him. Gremio looked down at Tyr, whose face was buried in his green cape, and whispered, "Young master." He recalled the days he wandered the wilderness in sadness, but things were different now. He was no longer alone. He had Tyr, and Tyr had him. The thought was enough to soothe Gremio, who found himself slowly falling asleep. The warm feeling the young master provides him is one he never wants to lose. Gremio looked down at Tyr's face once more. Looking at his peaceful face made him feel like the war was over, yet at the same time he somehow felt it was only just the beginning. Gremio picked up his axe and looked at it closely. He vowed to himself that when he returns to Master Tio's camp, he was going to begin training as a soldier in order to better protect the young master. Gremio then took great care as he carved, "I will always protect the young master" onto his axe, giving it the name Axe of the Oath. And that's it for Gremio's backstory. As I mentioned at the beginning, this backstory came from a short story titled Axe of the Oath from the Genso Suikoden Short Story Collection 1 that released in Japan in August 2000. And that's it for the character short stories. All 24 short stories across the 4 books have now been covered. I think it's a shame they stopped after only 4 books just a month before Suikoden 3 released. There are so many more characters from Suikoden 1 and 2 that I would have loved to have seen get a story. And there are so many characters in Suikoden 3 that could have benefited greatly from having a short story too. They could have told Edge's story. We already know the gist of it. Victor gave him the Celestial Sword to defeat a vampire to rescue his sister, but that's all we know. They could have told us the full events in a short story. They could have told us about Sharon and Futch's travels, or Bell and Gadget's journey to find Meg, Tuta and Mio's story from the High East Rebellion, or a story covering Watari's past and what this mysterious promise he made to the unknown woman was, or a story about Lucia and Beecham's time fighting in the Dunan Unification War. I'm getting a little carried away, but you get the idea. There are so many untold and unfinished stories in the Suikoden world, which I guess is the curse of having such a large cast of characters in each game. Unfortunately, not everyone gets the development or screen time that they need. Anyway, that's it for this video. The short story books have now been completely covered and it's time to move on to other videos. So if there are any other Suikoden or non-Suikoden topics you want me to make videos on, do let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching guys, and I'll catch you on the next one.